So that's another thing. I'm trying to establish the basis for why the annulment process happens, okay? So flip over the page. Okay, so Canon text 1063 tells you what my job is, what pastors of souls are supposed to be doing to help the community and to help prepare couples for marriage. You can kind of read that. It's a long canon, so it's a lot of work. It's okay, though. All right. It's good. It's very good. Just look at, this is what should be present in our community. And that's a question for all of us, not just the priest. Are these things present are they present in our community? Preaching, catechesis adapted to minors, youth, and adults. Even the use of social communication by which the Christian faithful are instructed about the meaning of Christian marriage. Whereas the culture kind of got a hold of them and saying marriage is just the one that you kind of have feelings for. You know, are we really thinking about what we believe marriage to be? Is that being taught? That's something that we probably should look at. Personal preparation to enter marriage, which just disposes the spouses to the holiness and the duties of their state. Are we really cultivating our own personal holiness before we get married? That's a good thing. Third, a fruitful liturgical celebration of marriage, which is to show forth that spouses signify and share in the mystery of the unity and fruitful love between Christ and the church. Does that come out, or are we looking at the dress only? I mean, is it really a spiritual meaning behind what we celebrate? And then lastly, help offer to those who are married, so that faithfully preserving and protecting the conjugal covenant, they daily come to lead holier and fuller lives in their family. Do we have the support for couples that are married? Okay? Here's just two more things, and then I'll get to the annulment process. So 1065, Catholics who have not yet received the sacrament of confirmation are to receive it before they are admitted to marriage, if it can be done without a grave inconvenience. So the idea is we should be fully initiated into the church when we receive a sacrament of a vocation. That happens quite a bit sometimes. Confirmation gets lost in the mix. So what you're trying to do is get them confirmed before they get married so they can receive more fruitfully the gift of marriage. Okay? So that's one reason to do. That's one reason sometimes people say they want to get confirmed. I want to get confirmed because I want to marry in the church. Is that the best reason? No, but it's still a pretty good reason. Okay? So let's look at the next one. To receive the sacrament of marriage fruitfully, spouses are urged especially to approach the sacraments of penance and of the Most Holy Eucharist. So we should be purifying ourselves, having God forgive us and strengthen us, receiving the communion more, so that we can be prepared to receive all that God wants to give us. Okay? And then let's look at number 1095. There are some hesitancies or things that prevent you from getting married, which is kind of sometimes shocks people. So here are some. The following are incapable of contracting marriage. Number one, those who lack the sufficient use of reason. That's one. That would have to be a judgment. Sometimes you have seen people who have Down syndrome get married. If that's the case, the pastor has to assess, can that person give themselves totally to a lifelong partnership? Okay, that's an example. Those who suffer from a grave defect of discretion of judgment concerning the essential matrimonial rights and duties mutually to be handed over and accepted. Are you able to live a lifelong commitment? Are you able to keep promises? Are you able to keep vows? Are you able to raise children? Are you able to be responsible? If those things are really not present, how can you enter marriage? Does that make sense? That's why you got to be a certain age in order to get married. Do you know that the universal law of the church for the whole world is that you have to be 16 for men and 14 for women to get married? Holy cats. So that's the universal law, but in the United States you have to at least be the legal age of 18 to get married. I have done one marriage of a 17-year-old marrying a 23-year-old. But I had to go to the parents to get the permission for the bride to get married. So that's something different, okay? Third, those who are not able to assume the essential obligations of marriage for causes of a psychic nature. If there's some psychological underpinning or difficulty that's not being treated, that isn't being medicated, how are you able to make a lifelong commitment? So those are some things of, probably got to put the brakes on before you actually proceed. It's for the sake of the sacrament, okay? Okay. That's all I wanted to cover there. Okay, so what I wanted to do in that sheet is just to establish the purpose of marriage. What is a marriage? A marriage is the consent between the parties, the bride and the groom. The sacrament of marriage is the only sacrament that's based on the mind and the heart of the person ministering the sacrament. You know, if it's Eucharist, you just need a priest, you need bread and wine, and you need him to say, this is my body, this is my blood. It doesn't matter the virtue of the priest. The priest could be in Las Vegas the night before, hungover, but if he shows up the next morning and does the prayers over the bread and wine, it is the Eucharist. Okay? But it's not necessarily the case with marriage. It deals with the mind and the heart. So does that make sense? Okay, now what I want to do is just look at this. If you're married, you probably went through this sheet, but you forgot about it. So what I want to do is to show you how this canon law that we looked at deals with people who want to get married. So what happens is that a bride and a groom, they're engaged. Like, yeah, we're engaged. Can't wait for the inwood in July. Right? Can we get married? So they come in, and I have to interview the bride and the groom separately. Okay, I have to interview them separately to let them be able to speak their mind if they have to, okay? So if you look at it, knowing that an oath is sacred and that perjury is a grave offense, do solemnly swear to tell the truth in answering the following questions. So you ask them to make an oath, their name, where they're from, age, date of birth. The really interesting question is, what's your present address? Is it the same or not? All right. Then, did they see how the question is? Are you confirmed? Want to make sure that they're confirmed, you see. Then the parish where they are, the parents that they come from, making sure they're not too related. All right? Not saying we're in the affinity. I want to say something, but this is going to be online, so I better not. Okay, all right. And then how long have you dated? How long have you been engaged? And now look at those questions there that we asked the bride and the groom. Then we give the definition of marriage. Marriage is a covenant which by nature is permanent and indissoluble, is ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and the education of offspring. Does that sound familiar? Is that what we just talked about? Right? So there's the definition. Then I ask them, do you agree to enter a marriage that is for life? And they're under oath, and they say yes. To give your spouse the right to have children? Yes. To be faithful to your spouse for life? Yes. Then there's some canonical issues. Have you ever been ordained or made public vows as a member of a Christian institute? If you're a priest, you can't get married. So you got to ask that question. Were you a priest ever? Were you a nun? Then you see the girls go like, what? Look at the next one. Are you related to your intended spouse by blood or marriage or by adoption? Then they all say no, and I say that's a good thing. All right? Look at the next one. Are you aware of any physical defect that would prevent you from having sexual intercourse? Then the faces get really weird. Why are you asking me this? Why is that? Right? Impotence is an impediment to marriage. If you're unable to have sexual intercourse, you're unable to get married. It's kind of interesting, huh? That's why we're in favor of Viagra. Okay? All right. Number 12. Are you giving your consent to this marriage freely? See, are you getting at the consent part? You see that? Are you being forced by any person or circumstance to enter this marriage? No. Hopefully they're saying no. Okay. Are you attaching any conditions to your marriage consent? I will marry you only if you make me happy 100% of the time. And some of them like pause. I'm like, he won't do that for you. No. Have you looked at it? Has either of you ever experienced any emotional or mental condition or chemical dependency? Going back to that canon, is there some background that maybe prevent you from making that, right? Then here's the kit and caboodle here. Have you ever attempted or entered a marriage before this day in a church or civilly or by common law? They have to say no to that. If they don't, then that's when the annulment process kicks in. Okay? So these are questions that you were asked. If you're married, you may have forgotten that awkward conversation, but you were asked these questions, okay? But if we understand it now after looking at the canons, you see how important they are, okay? All right, so we've gone through that, so I just want to recap. And then I'm going to give you just a little discussion, and I'll give you the next handout then, okay? Is this. Marriage is the consent between a man and a woman that are baptized, and they intend a life of lifelong partnership of love. They are seeking the good of their spouse, the procreation of children, the openness to life, and raising them in the faith. So when the Catholic Church says marriage, that's what the Catholic Church means when it says that word. I want to ask you, when you look at the general public, when they say the word marriage, what do they mean? That's where we're starting to kind of veer off from the wider culture. Most people define marriage as the person that I have a predominant emotional attachment to, the one that I love. And it's mostly reduced to just the emotional affection between two people. Do you see how the church's definition is different? So, okay. Just briefly talk at your tables. What's something that kind of struck you in this first part? 1, 2, 3, go. Like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Or, oh, I really said yes to that. Okay, just kind of talk with each other. How's it working, Danny? How's it working? Is it working okay?
Yeah, I can't pause it, so you're still on.
What were you going to ask?
I mean, I don't know how to pause it.
Outside the Catholic Church, is that
No, you're supposed to. Actually, the church won't allow that, but you're supposed to get permission to be married outside the church. You can typically go in front of another Christian minister. So you have to give the reasons why you want to have the dispensation. So, for example, a Jew and a Catholic can get married. The Catholic has to get the permission. They could do it during a Jewish ceremony, but you have to get permission in order to do it. And it's valid as long it's not a sacramental because they're not both baptized. It's a natural union. The Hindus get married all the time. It's just as permanent as ours, but ours has the dignity of the sacrament. It's supposed to symbolize the love of Christ for his church. That's what. Yep. What? Accepts marriage between two Jews, two Hindus, two Muslims. In another church, yeah, as long as the church gives permission for it. They have to practice their Catholic faith and then try to raise their children Catholic, if at all possible.
I think when you